Good evening, my fellow Canadians. So, I would just like to quickly put some viewpoints on the federal leaders debate. Basically, I would like to do a quick summarization of the performance of each candidate, starting in the order that I see them in this video. All credit to ctv.ca for the video clippings that are used in this video. So I thank you for that. So let's get into it. The opening, the opening of the debate was mostly about Maxime Bernier. I believe that these debates are somewhat rigged. By chance, Maxime was chosen twice for the first and the second debate. So I believe that the intention of this was to sort of classify him as a radical or an extremist. And the reason I say that is Max is not an extremist at all, but to some of these political leaders who don't share his views about globalism and are on the far radicalist left, they condemn him for being a patriot and for being practical. He also spoke about saving Alberta jobs. So I respect that. I'm happy that he mentioned it. So I think that Max would make a decent prime minister if elected, but I fail to see how it could be accomplished in this moment. His party, I believe, is sitting on like 7% or 3%. I can't really remember, but I think the figures are somewhat like that. That aside, Max seems to be a fair leader, but there was a lot of debating that put him in the crosshairs, especially by Jagmeet Singh. But Max seems to have some very valid viewpoints and a good economic strategy for the future of this country. He's definitely pro-business. So I can say that for him. Now, Jagmeet Singh was, I argue, the most aggressive candidate in this debate. He took the most airtime and he was attacking on all fronts. He was the person you had to watch out for if you're in this debate, because he's an eloquent speaker and he seemed to be able to cut in, hence the extra airtime, but that's his prerogative. The other leaders didn't do the same thing. He raised a lot of great points. I wish Andrew Scheer had raised the same thing, because I know he was thinking it, but Jagmeet's the one that got there first and mentioned it first. So first to the finish, you know what I mean? So, but Jagmeet had everybody on the ropes. He seemed to engage all his opponents at once. Sometimes Trudeau, sometimes Maxime, sometimes Scheer. But he had his opponents on the defensive, and I would say that of all the five of them, Jagmeet was, six of them, Jagmeet was the most memorable and the one that put everybody else on the defensive. Moving on to Andrew Scheer, I confess that there are times during the debate when Scheer was debating that I couldn't hear his voice. I find it difficult and distorted to hear. His voice is oftentimes very quiet. As a gentleman, he allows his opponents to interrupt him, and I think a few times he waited when he should have stayed on point and kept speaking and spoke louder. His points are very much valid. He accused Trudeau many times, not accuse, remind everybody of Trudeau's crimes, and brought that to light, so I appreciated that very much. He put Trudeau on the spot many times, and I thought that was going to be the focus of this debate, but I'll get into that later. Scheer did a good job on his points, and I believe Scheer would be the best candidate for Prime Minister. In spite of everything that he's done, he has the most legitimate chance to win, and his views represent a good vision, a good dream for this country, a vision that could bring us to a very prosperous future. In contrary, Theresa May, I find her views for the most part rather extreme, rather ignorant of the economy and repercussions of the implementation of her plans. She finds Trudeau to not have done enough for the environment, despite all of his gains and things that he's done for the environment while Prime Minister. Trudeau has done a lot of terrible things to this country, but I cannot say as a citizen that he hasn't done anything for the environment. I believe he's done a lot for the environment, too much for the environment, in fact. So I find her views extremely divisive and radicalist in nature. I don't think she really cares about the implementation cost of her goals. She simply wants this country to be on green energy and away from petroleum, fossil fuels, any carbon emissions whatsoever. She wants the entire country to be without heat, without cars, and anything else made by petroleum. I don't want to condemn anyone, but I ask you, the logic in planning something such as that, and the implementation cost. Just look at Ontario. They were in the dark because electricity was too expensive to afford, so they were burning candles to keep warm. In this day and age, with all the technology that exists, oil should be here to stay. Oil is the life's blood of this country, and I don't understand why environmental extremism exists here. How could you put the well-being of your citizens behind such goals as saving the environment when China is producing 100% more than we are at the very least in terms of carbon emissions? And no matter what we do, our reduction will count for nothing compared to China. So it's entirely redundant to me and a foolish pursuit of a goal. I'm for saving the environment in the sense that we should take care of the planet in the most responsible way, meaning we don't dump garbage into our oceans and so on, and we act responsible. But, truth be told, our country is the most highly regulated, and we have the most responsible process to refine our oil and so on. We abide by very strict rules in this country. So I can't think of a country that has more accountability in the environment than we do. The best is always the enemy of the good. So I believe that the implementation of our plans have been successful and actually damaging to our business. Which brings me to Trudeau. Trudeau in this debate was extremely weak, withdrawn. His arguments were non-committal answers, as usual. He didn't really answer the questions directly, as usual. His points are forgettable and repetitive. He lacks any real substance to any of his arguments. When confronted with his previous scandals, he talked himself around it, but it was rather obvious. You can't really cover up what you've done, especially when questioned directly in front of the press. So Trudeau's answers, again, were non-committal, avoiding questions entirely, talking his way around it, and essentially not answering too much. His debate was weak at best. The other candidates, including Theresa, did a better job than he did. Let's see who's next. But the debate was very helpful to me. The problem was that I feel, as always, that the candidates don't get enough time. They get such a short time to give an answer. It's a minute. And the questions they ask need to be analyzed more in depth. Like, you could talk for half an hour, maybe even days on certain topics. So I really wish that the debate had lasted longer. It was extremely brief for a lot of the candidates. especially for Maxime Bernier and for Andrew Scheer. It was not short for Singh. Singh seemed to, as I said before, Singh seemed to get the most airtime. I don't know if that's the fault of the mediator. It could be. He was constantly interrupting other candidates and being extremely aggressive on his points. I like that in a leader, but he's not the candidate that I support, and I don't support the NDP. So that aside, he did a great job for his own party. But you'll notice if you watch the entire video, you'll notice that Singh has the most airtime, without a doubt. Let's see. I just wanted to bring to light the leader of the Bloc Québécois, but I can't get him up for the moment. Let's see. He's maybe further out. No, there's Singh again. The leader of the Parti Québécois seems to be exactly on point. In Canada, many of us here in Alberta like to think of Quebec as its own country, which it sort of is. Quebec has been striving for independence forever, and I would classify them as a sovereign nation. I'm sure many Quebecers feel the same. They are very much different from Canada, but they hold a lot of the political sway in this country. So they're in favor of separatism, and Alberta is becoming more in favor of separatism because of this man. So all I can say is the leader of the Parti Québécois, his name is François Blanchet. He did a good job to represent Quebec's interest, and he reinforced the point that Quebec is for itself, and the rest of the country has to pay into it, I guess. So, as an Albertan, I find that very disheartening. There is definitely a clear divide between Quebec and Alberta. Here is Andrew Scheer again engaging Trudeau. I really appreciated that part. Trudeau has literally nothing to stand on. If you grill him, he'll be defenseless. There's no argument he could make. He's guilty of sin. He should legally resign. But like you can see that Scheer is very much at ease and overconfident because he thinks that he's got it in the bag. But I would argue that Scheer should adopt the same tactic as Singh did and go on the offensive because he has so much to go on. But as usual, Scheer is a little bit too soft, and he should be more aggressive and reinforce his points. But anyhow, I think that just about covers it. The Parti Québécois was the one I didn't really report too much on. The leader of that party is a very eloquent speaker as well, even though he didn't get as much airtime. But that aside, his points seem to validate my worst fear, which was that Quebec's interests just don't align at all with Western Canada. They are, in practice at least, their own country in every way. Well, not in every, but in many ways. So separation is becoming more and more of a favorable idea in Canada. I would say that it's disheartening to admit, but it's true. Canada is extremely divided, and there's just no going back now. I don't know. I don't see how we can repair it. Quebec should separate. Alberta should separate, and the rest of the Confederation, they can decide what to do province by province and territory by territory. But we are so different in our perspectives. It's and it was confirmed here. It's hard for me to admit it, but Canada itself has become extremely divided under Trudeau, and I don't see how we're going to heal it. It's disheartening, really. But he represented his interest well. He went on the offensive against Scheer to try to confirm his policies for Quebec. It was sort of a trap play, but Scheer didn't fall into it. Thank goodness for that. But you could see Max here as sort of bowing his head because I'm sure he's aware of this viewpoint, but he feels exasperated by the divisiveness of the candidate from Quebec. And he also is from Quebec, but he's not advocating for a separation. So in that way, I could say Maxime Bernier, that's a great man. He would be a great prime minister. He seems to be very neutral. So that means that east or west or north or south, doesn't matter what part of Canada, I think he'd be a prime minister for all of Canada. But unfortunately, his party is so new, so young. It will take time for that party to mature and grow into a legitimate party, and it may take years of development before it's ready to finally come. But he had to start somewhere. I feel bad because Max, we can use you in the Conservative Party. I know you're not really happy with them right now, but we can use all the help we can get. And if he was in, I have no doubt he wouldn't be prime minister, but he'd be right up at the top somewhere. I'm not advocating for whatever position he might want, but this country lacks strong leadership, wise leadership. We need a leader who's going to be strong and unite us again, and protect our borders, and rebuild our economy that Trudeau has deeply, deeply wounded. In fact, he's bludgeoned us in Alberta. There's 25% unemployment, as far as I can tell from some statistics that I read. There are 200,000 people out of work just in the oil sector. But of course, that being the lifeblood of this country, it's far, far deeper than that. So I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. As a Canadian, I look forward to the election, and I look forward to the next leaders' debate in which I will comment again. So thank you for your time and attention. Good night.